Have you ever started something for God and stopped? Maybe you know exactly when it happened. There was a calling, a commitment, a step of faith you took. And then life got complicated. The opposition came. The resources dried up. The timing felt wrong. And somewhere along the way, without making a conscious decision to quit, you simply stopped moving forward. And the strange thing is, you got used to it. That is not a small thing. Getting used to an unfinished calling is one of the quietest and most dangerous places a person can settle into. Because it does not feel like rebellion. It feels like wisdom. It feels like patience. It feels like waiting for the right moment. The people of Jerusalem knew this feeling. They had been living in it for 16 years. And then a man named Haggai opened his mouth. The Bible tells us almost nothing about him personally. No father's name, no tribe, no hometown, no physical description. What the Bible gives us is 4 messages, 4 precise dates, and a community that went from 16 years of stillness to active construction within 23 days. This is the story of Haggai. And if you are honest with yourself, it might also be yours. If biblical stories like this one matter to you, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on the notification bell. Every day we go deeper into the lives of the people from Scripture who still have something to say. To understand what Haggai was doing, you first need to understand what he was walking into. Because the crisis in Jerusalem in 520 BC was not the kind that announces itself with sirens. It was the far more dangerous kind. The kind that had been normalized. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to give up on what God called them to build. It happens gradually, one postponed decision at a time, one reasonable excuse layered onto another, until the weight of all of them together has buried something that was once alive with purpose. And when everyone around you has accepted a broken situation as permanent, the person who stands up and says things do not have to stay this way is not always received with gratitude. Sometimes they are ignored. Sometimes they make people uncomfortable. Because naming a wound that people have worked hard to stop feeling can seem like an intrusion. Haggai walked into exactly that kind of room. To understand how it got there, we need to go back 18 years. In 538 BC, Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, issued a decree that no one saw coming. The Jewish exiles who had been living in Babylon for decades were free to return to their homeland. Not only free to return, but Cyrus commanded that the temple of God in Jerusalem be rebuilt. He even returned the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the first temple. The Bible attributes this directly to God. In Ezra chapter 1, verse 1, we read that the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, a pagan king opened by God, to become the instrument of Israel's restoration. Around 50,000 people made the journey back to the land. They arrived to find Jerusalem still largely in ruins. The city had been destroyed by Babylon in 586 BC. The walls were broken, the houses were burned, and where Solomon's temple had once stood, there was rubble and silence. But there was also hope. The returning exiles gathered in Jerusalem, rebuilt the altar, restored the sacred feasts, and in 536 BC, with great celebration, they laid the foundation of the new temple. The Bible records what happened at that moment in Ezra chapter 3. The older men who had seen the first temple wept loudly. The younger men shouted for joy. The sound was so great it could be heard from far away, and no one could tell the weeping apart from the celebration. It was one of those moments that carries more weight than words can hold. And then the construction stopped. Neighboring peoples in the region sent letters to the Persian court arguing that Jerusalem was a rebellious city and that completing the temple posed a political threat. The opposition was effective enough that the work was officially halted, as the Book of Ezra records clearly. Here is where the story turns complicated. The political opposition eventually faded. The original decree of Cyrus was never revoked. There was no permanent legal barrier to resuming the work. And yet, the construction did not resume. The Bible does not give us a single decisive explanation for why. But Haggai chapter 1 verse 2 gives us the clearest window into what was happening inside the community. The people were saying the time had not yet come to rebuild the house of the Lord. Notice the word yet. They had not rejected the project. They had indefinitely postponed it. There was always a reason why right now was not quite the moment. The economy was too fragile. The population was too thin. The political environment was still too uncertain. The resources were simply not there. Every one of those concerns may have been real. But taken together, they had become a permanent reason to wait. And the yet stretched to 16 years. During those 16 years, the people were not idle. They had built their own homes. Some of them, the text tells us, had built paneled houses, which in the ancient world was not a sign of bare survival, but of comfort and investment. They had planted fields. They had established routines. In every practical sense, they had settled into life in the land. The temple could wait. There would be time for that later. This is the world Haggai stepped into. The book of Haggai opens with a simple line. The word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. And that is nearly everything the Bible tells us about him personally. We do not know his lineage. Almost every other prophet in the Hebrew Scriptures is introduced with at least the name of his father. Isaiah, son of Amoz, Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, Ezekiel, son of Buzi. But Haggai has no listed father, no tribal connection, no city of origin. What we do know is something unusual. The book of Haggai stands out for its remarkable precision in dating. Every one of his 4 messages includes the exact day, month, and year. This level of specificity was not common. It gives the book the character of an official document, a public record. Haggai was not delivering vague spiritual impressions. He was speaking on the record at identified moments to named individuals about a concrete and measurable task. His name in Hebrew, Haggai, is most commonly understood to mean festive, or one born on a feast day. The Bible does not draw any connection between his name and his ministry. But it is worth pausing on the irony that a man whose name is tied to celebration was called to speak into a season of prolonged stagnation. The Bible records these events according to the Hebrew calendar. The modern dates mentioned here are approximate equivalents in the Julian calendar, provided for clarity. August 29th, 520 BC. The first day of the 6th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, king of Persia. Haggai does not address the general population first. He goes to Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah, and to Joshua the high priest. He begins at the level of leadership. This is deliberate. A community rarely moves before its leaders do. There is no use calling people to action if the ones responsible for direction have not yet received the word themselves. Haggai understands this, and he begins with a direct, personal confrontation. The message opens not with a command, but with a question. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses, while this house remains a ruin? He is not condemning their character. He is not accusing them of wickedness. He is placing 2 images side by side and allowing the contrast to do its work. Your homes are finished and comfortable. God's house is rubble. Look at both of those things at the same time. The word paneled in the original Hebrew refers to wood covering the interior walls or ceiling of a structure. In the ancient Near East, this was not a survival necessity. It was comfort. It was the step beyond shelter, the point where you stop building for function and start building for pleasure. There is nothing wrong with a comfortable home, but the text invites us to notice where the effort went and where it did not. Then Haggai delivers what becomes the signature phrase of this entire book. Give careful thought to your ways. In Hebrew, shimu levavkem. Consider your paths. Examine what you are actually doing. Look at the results of where you are placing your energy. The phrase appears 5 times across the 2 brief chapters of this book. It is not repetition for rhetorical effect. It is the central diagnostic question of Haggai's entire ministry. And he backs it with evidence. You have planted much, but harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but you are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes in it. This is not poetic imagery disconnected from life. This is a picture of a community working hard but coming up short in every direction. The harvests disappoint. The economics frustrate. The comfort they have chased keeps slipping away. And Haggai connects this directly to the misalignment between their priorities and God's house. He is not describing divine punishment in the sense of anger being unleashed. He is describing what happens when a community systematically places its own comfort at the center and pushes the things of God to the edges. The life that results from that inversion tends to feel like a purse with holes in it, always leaking, never quite full. The instruction that follows is clear and immediate. Go up into the mountains and bring down timber and build my house, so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored. Not a vision, not a committee, not a feasibility study. Go get the wood, build the house. The message was delivered on August 29th. The work resumed on September 21st, 23 days later. The Bible records this plainly in chapter 1, verses 12 through 15. Zerubbabel and Joshua and the whole remnant of the people obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the message of the prophet Haggai, because the Lord their God had sent him. And the people feared the Lord. 23 days from the first word to the first stone being lifted. Before the work begins, Haggai delivers a brief word of assurance. It is only 1 sentence in length. I am with you. That is the entire content of what God sends through Haggai before the labor starts. Not a detailed construction plan, not a promise that obstacles would vanish, just the confirmation of presence. It is worth sitting with that for a moment. Sometimes the only thing standing between a long stagnation and the beginning of obedient movement is one word from God that simply says, I am with you. Not later, not when the conditions are right. Now, here, in this. Weeks pass. The work is moving. Hands are lifting stones for the first time in 16 years. Something real is happening. On October 17th, 520 BC, the 21st day of the 7th month, Haggai delivers his second message. The tone has shifted. This is no longer a challenge to begin. It is a word to people who have already begun and are now struggling with something else. Who is left among you who saw this house in its former glory? How does it look to you now? Does it not seem to you like nothing? The question is addressed to a discouragement that does not stop construction, but follows people into it. Those who had seen or heard stories of Solomon's temple, with its carved cedar, its gold overlay, its dimensions that spoke of resources no small returning community could replicate, may have looked at the rough stones they were placing and felt the weight of the comparison. We are building something small. The old one was magnificent. What is the point? Haggai does not tell them to stop comparing. He does not rebuke the feeling. He delivers God's answer directly into the middle of it. Be strong, Zerubbabel. Be strong, Joshua. Be strong, all you people of the land. Work, for I am with you. 3 times the phrase "be strong" goes out. Once to the governor, once to the priest, once to the people. And every time, the basis for that strength is not their own will or determination. The basis is the presence of God. My spirit remains among you. Do not fear. Then comes a promise, recorded in chapter 2, verse 9. The glory of this present house will be greater than the glory of the former house, and in this place I will grant peace. This verse has been discussed by commentators for centuries, and we should be honest that it carries a depth that goes beyond what can be fully explained in a single sentence. What we can say with confidence is this: God was not asking the people to lower their expectations. He was telling them that what he was building through their obedience was part of something larger than what their eyes could measure at that moment. On December 18th, 520 BC, the 24th day of the 9th month, Haggai brings a third message. This one arrives in an unusual form. He poses 2 questions to the priests about the laws of purity. He asks whether consecrated meat, carried in a garment, can make other food holy by contact. The priests answer no. Then he asks whether someone who has become ritually unclean through contact with a corpse can pass that uncleanness to food by touching it. The priests answer yes. The principle is straightforward. Uncleanness transmits through contact. Holiness does not work the same way. Then Haggai applies this directly to the community. So it is with this people and this nation in my sight, declares the Lord. Whatever they do and whatever they offer there is defiled. This is not a rejection of the building work that is now underway. It is a diagnostic observation. The years of neglect had left a residue in the community, a habit of misaligned priorities that did not simply disappear the moment construction resumed. You cannot pick up where you left off and assume that everything is automatically restored. The inner condition of the people matters alongside the outer work they are doing. But the message does not end there. From this day on, from this 24th day of the 9th month, give careful thought to the day when the foundation of the temple was laid. From this day on, I will bless you. From this day on. That is a dividing line being drawn in time. Everything before it belongs to the old chapter. From this point, something new begins. The third message is a marker, placed by God himself, between the season of stagnation and the season of restoration. Later the same day, December 18th, Haggai receives and delivers a 4th message. This one is addressed to Zerubbabel alone. God speaks of shaking the heavens and the earth, of overturning royal thrones and shattering the power of foreign kingdoms. These are words about movements that stretch beyond any single generation. And then, inside that vast frame, God speaks to one ordinary man in a small, politically insignificant province. On that day, I will take you, Zerubbabel my servant, and I will make you like my signet ring, for I have chosen you. In the ancient world, a signet ring was not worn for decoration. It was the seal of its owner's authority and identity. When pressed into wax or clay, it left a mark that carried the full weight of the person it belonged to. Documents sealed with it could not be disregarded. Zerubbabel was not a king. He had no army. His province was a minor administrative unit inside a vast Persian empire. And God said to him, "You are my seal. You carry something of my mark on you. What I am doing here, in this small place, in this unimpressive building project, I have chosen you to be part of it." The Bible does not record how Zerubbabel received this word. We are not told what he said, or whether he wept, or how long it stayed with him. The text simply moves forward. But the book of Zechariah, written in the same period and addressed to the same community, confirms what Haggai's fourth message implies. Zerubbabel did complete the temple. Zechariah chapter 4 verse 9 records God's word about him directly. The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this temple. His hands will also complete it. And in 516 BC, 4 years after Haggai's 4 messages, the temple was dedicated. The book of Ezra records the celebration. The people observed the Passover with joy, because the Lord had filled them with joy by changing the attitude of the king of Assyria toward them, so that he assisted them in the work on the house of God. After verse 23 of chapter 2, Haggai disappears from the biblical record. We do not know how old he was when he died. We do not know what happened to him in the 4 years between his ministry and the completion of the temple. We do not know whether he lived to see the finished building. He is mentioned once more in Ezra, briefly, as one of the prophets who supported the rebuilding effort. And then nothing more is said about him. A man whose words moved an entire community from 16 years of stagnation to active construction in 23 days. A man whose ministry is contained in 38 verses, the second shortest book in the Old Testament. And we know almost nothing about his personal life. In a world that measures significance by visibility and name recognition, Haggai stands as a quiet and consistent reminder that God does not always write long biographies for the people he uses most precisely. The work was done. The message was delivered. The record shows what God accomplished through him. And then the name recedes. This too is worth sitting with. The book of Haggai is organized around a single repeated phrase. Give careful thought to your ways. 5 times in 38 verses. It appears before the call to build, after the discouragement sets in the middle of the purity discussion, and as the frame for the announcement of blessing. Haggai uses it the way a skilled craftsman uses a level, returning to it repeatedly to test whether things are actually aligned. Notice what he does not say. He does not say, give careful thought to your theology. He does not say, examine your doctrine. He does not say, evaluate your religious sincerity. He says, your ways, your daily actual choices, where your hours go, where your money lands, what you build first and what you set aside for later. The people in Jerusalem were not unbelievers. They had returned from exile at enormous personal cost, specifically because of their commitment to God and to the land. They maintained the altar. They observed the feasts. By any external religious measure, they were practicing people of faith. But religious practice and aligned priorities are not the same thing. A person can be regularly present at worship and still have their deepest investments pointing in a different direction than God's house. That was precisely the situation Haggai addressed. The altar was rebuilt, the feasts were kept, and the house of God was rubble. When God speaks through Haggai, he does not attack their faith. He asks them to look at the gap between what they say matters and what they are actually building, and he asks them to look at the results. The purse with holes in it is not just a metaphor for material disappointment. It is a description of what a misaligned life tends to feel like from the inside. Full of activity, short on fruit, always working, never arriving. The instruction that follows the diagnosis is not elaborate. It is one movement, one's obedient step, taken honestly and then repeated. Go get the timber. Build. I am with you. There is a question quietly running beneath the surface of this entire book that deserves direct attention. Why does it matter so much that this particular house gets rebuilt? For the returning community, the temple was not primarily a building. It was the place where God's name dwelled among his people. His presence, the same presence that had filled Solomon's temple at its dedication in a way so overwhelming that the priests could not continue their service, was tied to that house in the understanding of the covenant. The exile had been, among other things, the departure of that presence from among them. The return from exile was supposed to mark the restoration of that relationship, not just the return to a geographic location. But the people had come back to the land and built comfortable lives and left the house of God in ruins. In doing so, without perhaps fully recognizing it, they had reconstructed the same pattern that had contributed to the exile in the first place. Put your own comfort first. Let God's things wait. There will be time for that later. Haggai's message is not primarily about construction management. It is about the inner orientation of a people toward God. The building project is the visible test of an invisible reality. Are you willing to subordinate your own comfort to the things of God or not? The answer is written in the stones or in the lack of them. When God says through Haggai that the glory of the second house will be greater than the glory of the first, he is not talking about architectural quality. The second temple was, by external measures, considerably less impressive than Solomon's. He is pointing toward something that cannot be measured in gold or cedar. What that greater glory refers to, God does not fully explain in these 38 verses. But the community was being asked to trust that what they were building in obedience was part of something whose full meaning would only become clear later. They were not asked to understand the entire plan before they picked up a stone. They were asked to move. That is itself a profound spiritual truth. Obedience frequently precedes understanding. The act of building in faithfulness, even without seeing the whole picture, is itself part of the formation that God is doing in the people who build. Think honestly about something you stopped building, not a physical structure. Something you were called to, invested in, started moving toward, and then set aside because the moment did not feel right. A relationship you were supposed to pursue and kept delaying. A commitment to a community or a church that you pulled back from when it became costly. A pattern of prayer or scripture that used to be daily and gradually disappeared. A step of obedience you have been surrounding with conditions for years. The conditions around the things that matter most to God rarely look ideal. That is not a reason to wait. That is simply the nature of the terrain. The people of Jerusalem had real obstacles in year one of the pause. The opposition was genuine. The political situation was unstable. The resources were limited. None of that was invented. But those same real obstacles became the permanent justification year after year, long after the circumstances had actually changed. The reasons did not grow with time. The people's comfort with them did. There is a difference between wisdom and the kind of waiting that is really just fear dressed in theological language. Waiting on God is not the same as using God's name to avoid a difficult step. Haggai does not ask the people to resolve all their uncertainties first. He does not tell them to wait until they have a complete vision or sufficient resources or the right moment. He gives them the next physical action. Go to the mountain. Bring timber. Lay a stone. Sometimes the clarity comes from the movement, not before it. The people did not have the full blueprint when they resumed building. They had one word from God, and they started. And God confirmed his presence. And the work continued for 4 years. And the temple was completed. The purse with holes in it is still a recognizable experience. The sense of pouring energy into the things of your own life and never quite arriving. the exhaustion that does not make sense given how hard you are working. Haggai's diagnostic question is as useful now as it was in 520 BC. Consider your ways, not with shame, with honesty. And then take the next step. On August 29th, 520 BC, a man whose name we barely know, whose family we cannot trace, and whose face we will never see, stood before a community that had learned to be comfortable with unfinished business. He did not have a powerful platform. He had no army behind him, no political leverage, no track record of famous miracles. He had a word from God and the willingness to say it plainly to the people who needed to hear it. His 4 messages span less than 4 months, 38 verses. And somewhere inside those verses, a community stirred. The Bible is clear about what actually happened. It was not the eloquence of Haggai's words that moved the people. The text says it in plain language. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, son of Jozadak, the high priest, and the spirit of the whole remnant of the people. They came and began to work on the house of the Lord Almighty, their God. The Lord stirred up. Haggai spoke the truth faithfully. God moved in the hearts of the people. These are not competing explanations. They are 2 parts of the same event. 4 years later, the temple was finished. Haggai's personal story closes before that moment. We do not know if he lived to see the completed building, or whether he stood at its dedication, or whether he died quietly before the final stone was placed. The text does not say. What the text gives us is the message he carried and the response it received, and it says nothing further about the man himself. That is not a tragedy. That is a man who understood what his work was. He was not called to be remembered. He was called to speak, and he spoke. So here is the question that this book, all 38 verses of it, leaves on the table. What have you been telling yourself is not yet the time for? How many years has that been sitting with you? The God who spoke to Zerubbabel and Joshua and a small, tired community in 520 BC is the same God who speaks today. And the word has not changed. Give careful thought to your ways. I am with you. Go build. If this story reached something in you today, leave a comment below. Tell us what God brought to mind as you heard it. What have you been postponing? What is the next stone you need to pick up? We read every comment, and your story matters. If this video was worth your time, please give it a like. It helps more people find content like this. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Every day we return to the pages of Scripture and explore the lives of the people who still speak to us today. God bless you. See you in the next one.